Hello guys, and welcome back to part 8 of our hard surface modeling tutorial where we're making a truck in Maya. We've made a good amount of progress on the actual modeling part, but I think we're going to finish this off. We've shown you quite a lot. We've gotten over the difficult part of creating the actual cab. I think if you've got to this point, you're definitely skilled and knowledgeable enough to create the rest yourself. But there is one more really difficult part that I'd like to touch on, and that's making the tire. And this will almost be kind of a standalone episode in itself on how to actually make a tire. I have a few images here that I picked up from the actual Michelin website of a tire that can be used for this truck, so we know it's going to be to the right size. I know a lot of people struggle with this type of pattern, and they're thinking, how on earth do I actually make this? So in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that from start to finish, and while it seems complicated, it's actually not as bad as it looks, right? So go ahead and do what I've done here. So I have a image on the side, from the side, an image from the front so that we get the dimensions correct, and I've also gone ahead and just positioned that where the tire should be on our truck, and in order to get that into the right place, I used our reference from the side for the truck itself, which has the position of the tire, and I've just scaled the reference of the tire to match that as well. So once you've got that set up, we'll go ahead and actually get into the modeling. Okay, so now that we have our image plane set up, I've gone ahead and created one more just for the pattern, okay? I have some close-up reference of the tire, which we're going to use to actually work as a guide to create this pattern. So for the time being, I'll hide the front and side reference, and I've just positioned this directly on top of the grid. We're going to come to the top view. So there's a few different ways we can do this, but I think the best way is to actually create some of the shapes ourselves first with a cube. Which sounds a bit counterintuitive, but hear me out. It is a good idea to do it this way. Or in fact, even a plane. And we'll reduce the divisions to 1 on the width and the height. And essentially we're going to create these shapes just flat with a plane first. And the reason to do this is because it's going to make the process of actually making all these different shapes so much easier than just making the tire on a plane already. Like if we were to try and cut in all of these shapes, it would be an absolute nightmare. Believe me, I've tried. It's definitely not what you want to be doing. Okay, and because we're dealing with some perspective here, you want to make sure you're picking the right lines when you're making this shape, okay? If you're using a similar reference, you can see the top of the line. So you can see the topmost line here starts here, and there's some shadow here, and then this is the interior, but we don't want to follow that. We want this exterior one, okay? We can then duplicate that and use that to create the next part, which is a slightly different shape. So it comes in here. So we'll add 2 extra lines like that. And I'll just change the pivot point and pull in like so. Okay, and again, we're working really, really low poly. We always want to work low poly for as long as possible, just because it makes our lives a lot easier. We can then go ahead and create another plane, and we'll start making these smaller shapes. And again, this is exactly the same process as the bigger ones. And then that will come flush to there. Okay, and then we have this long squiggly one that goes all the way across. So again, we'll do the exact same thing. Okay, and we'll create that one pretty much in the same way we've done everything else. We'll do another plane, but with this one, because it goes all the way across the tire, we're actually only going to make half, and then we'll duplicate it and mirror it across to the other side, so we only have to do half of the work. Okay, so this is how much I've made, and I'm paying attention trying not to make this too complicated for the time being, topology-wise, because we don't want this to be too dense. So for these curved parts, I'm only going and adding a single extra division in the middle, and then having 2, one at the start, one at the end. And right here is the halfway point, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a cut, literally running straight down the middle, and I want this to be going flat. So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and with the scale tool selected, I'm going to scale in this way from right to left just to flatten that out. I'm then going to just enable the grid, and I want to make sure this is sitting just smack central in the middle, so that when we come to duplicate this across later, we don't have any issues. Now we can go ahead and turn the grid off again. One last one that we need to create is this one here in the middle, and then that'll be all of our shapes made. And again, we'll just do that in the same way we've done each other one so far. In fact, with this one, we can duplicate and reuse this piece here because it's quite a similar shape, and just modify it slightly. A lot of the time when you're modeling, it's easier to reuse things you've already made rather than making something from scratch, and it saves you time. Okay, so now that we've created these shapes, the tricky part now is actually joining these up and turning this into a pattern that we can duplicate in either direction. So that's really where the difficult part here comes. So that's what we're going to focus on now before we move on to anything else. And we want this to be duplicatable from left to right, so in the x-axis, but also in the z-axis, or in the z-axis as well. In either direction, by the way, because we're going to basically take this pattern that we've made, and you can see here, it just duplicates. If I duplicate all of these now and move these forward, we end up having the exact same pattern, okay? Alright, one other thing that we need to do is, you may have noticed, if I go ahead and duplicate this now, we have these parts here, but we're actually missing a few bits. We need 3 more, and they're just duplicates of what we have already. We need another one of these long squiggly lines, this line here in the middle, and another one of these lines in our initial shape. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate these and pull them up to match, like so, okay? So these are the shapes that we have to deal with. So first things first, what I like to do is select everything and then come to mesh and combine to turn that into one piece, okay? I'm just going to delete the history as well to clear up our outliner. And at this point, we need to start making a few considerations. So we need to start bridging some of this together because we have a lot of empty space, and obviously that's not what we want. So what I like to do first is take all of these and essentially turn this into a block, or kind of a square shape. So to do that, I generally just start sort of bridging things together and creating a sort of outline around it. So that process can be a little bit scary, but generally I like to start from the outside in. It's kind of like a puzzle that you need to piece together in your mind and with your model on the screen. So I'm going to start extruding some parts out here. And a good tip actually when we're doing something like this is to, if I just turn off this button here, it may already be turned off for you, but if you turn this off, okay, and then let's apply a separate material to the parts that we know are going to form parts of our tread, okay? So we just created those 2 new faces, but let's deselect those and select everything else. And just apply a new material. We can just do a Lambert if you want to. And then just go ahead and change the color of that Lambert to basically anything. I'm going to make mine kind of like an orange, bit of a muted orange, but yeah, it can be any color that you want. Just to signify which parts are going to be extruded and which parts are not the tread, it's just the rest of the tire. Okay? So from this point, I want to make sure that the edges here are flat or flush. And in that way we can start extruding things or bridging things together, okay? And I'm going to do this from the top view for a little while. And what I'll do is I'll kind of show you my process. And we'll go through it a little bit, and then eventually I'll time-lapse it. And you can still see me doing it, but I won't be talking all the way through it because we might be here for a little while. But you can see what I'm starting to do is just create an outline around the edge. Okay? Of our model. Of the tread pieces that we've created. And a lot of this will probably end up changing, but that's okay. So you can see here, we've got a few extra bits we need to change the color of because they're supposed to be not tread. Okay, so you can see as we go through, we're starting to get this kind of outline, and essentially I'm just going to go all the way around and then connect back up to here, and then we'll start looking at filling in the middle. So I'm just making sure to join up to where our edges are, where things finish off. We can go ahead and do an edit mesh and merge to connect those up, and I'll just do a smooth preview generally just to make sure those things are connected, and we can see they are, judging by how it's deforming. Then we're going to come out a little bit, and we're going to do something similar to what we did over here. We'll just add another edge, and then pull this down to match, and then we're just going to bridge here. Okay, so we've created that outline. Now, next what we need to do is start filling in the interior, and this is where it gets a little bit scary. You can, if you want to, just select all the edges and start doing fill hole, but bear in mind that will create some issues, generally. You can see here we're getting some overlapping faces, so I wouldn't always recommend doing that. In some cases, like with this one here, it is okay, because that's all one continuous edge, but where it isn't one continuous edge, I wouldn't recommend doing it, like with these extra pieces, okay? So if here I can just fill that in. But with this, we're probably going to have to do a bit of work first to connect some of this up. And again, I'm just going to reapply the standard surface. Just to make sure that we have our tread actually highlighted and we know what we're working with. Okay, now those are joined up and that's created one continuous edge, you should just be able to do a fill hole on that. And then we'll do the exact same thing over here. We may actually have to add a few extra edges in here in order to do a bridge, but that's okay. Okay, and then we'll do the same here. Okay, so now that we have the pattern on the inside, we now need to start actually cleaning up this topology, because obviously this isn't ideal at all, and it's just kind of roughed in. So there's a few obvious things we can do, right? Like here can probably connect up to here. This vertex can connect up to this vertex, and then we can continue that going straight down. So generally what I like to do is get the obvious ones out of the way first. Here as well. Then this can come and connect to here. And this essentially forms pretty much a straight line right down the middle. Then once I've done that, I kind of like to get rid of these extra ones like this. Or be careful not to remove too many, because sometimes that can then create issues. You see if I delete that, this edge goes away. Now this geometry here is pretty much going to break, because you've got edges just on an island like this and not connected to anything. Generally you don't want that, so we want to have at least two supporting edges. So we can probably go ahead and add an edge like this. Have that connect up there, then I'm just going to delete this one here for the time being. Okay, so we have a few running across. This can probably connect up to here, and then that can just go straight across like so. I'm holding down Control and Shift, by the way, if you haven't seen that before, to go into straight lines. That can connect up to there. So you see a lot of these right now are just easy wins. And we still have a lot of work to do on the interior here. But we're just starting to connect up some of the more obvious points, which go in sort of straight lines. And I like to do it this way because it's kind of like a process of elimination. you're sort of breaking it down into smaller, easier to deal with chunks, which will then make it simpler for you to actually look at, rather than just having this big, massive, you know, problem. Because if it's like with anything in life, right? If there's a lot of different steps, it seems kind of insurmountable. But once you start breaking it down into smaller steps, like sub steps, then it starts to feel a lot easier. So, and it's the same thing here. Just break it down into smaller steps. Okay, and you can see we've already joined up so many of these edges at this point. Got a little triangle there, but that's okay. We can fix that up in a bit. One thing I'm probably going to do, actually, is take all of these and just flatten them. So that goes in a straight line. Just going to make our lives a little bit easier. Same here as well. So we're going to take these edges that we've made, and I'm holding down Control and Shift to make sure that slides. And I'm just making these lines we've created flat. Okay, so that's a pretty good start, but obviously there's still a fair amount to clean up. So what I'll start with doing again is just some of the more easy wins. So this here, these vertices, we can probably just pull these straight across like this. Again, here, maybe we'll just come across like so. Here, there can probably just be a straight line as well. This here will get this to follow the flow and then come straight across. This here can come straight down. Or perhaps it can come down to here. And then come into the middle. And then come straight across. Like that. So tires and tire tread is quite a tricky shape to do. It's very, very complicated. The topology is probably going to get a bit messy. Once we've sorted this out, it's then going to be our job to try and figure out ways to make it a bit more even, because we are going to have to make this curved at some point. And as you might know, if you've done much modeling, is that you'll know that with curved shapes, you generally want more even topology. Otherwise, you're going to get problems. Okay, so if you get to a point where you feel like you've cleaned up all the edges and you don't have any more n-gons, a quick way to check, because sometimes our eyes are going to betray us and we're not really going to be able to tell if we have cleaned everything up. You can come up to Mesh here, go to Clean Up and press this little square. If it says Clean Up Matching Polygons, just turn that off, turn that to Select, and what this is going to do, based on this Fix by Tessellation section, you can see here we've got faces with more than 4 sides, concave faces and faces with holes. We don't have to worry about those two for the time being, so you could go and turn those off if you want to. But what we're looking for is faces with more than 4 sides, which would be an n-gon, which we don't want. If I just click Apply, you can see here we still have a few left, and that's because there are a few points that I've missed. So we have one here, and one here, and now that they're highlighted, you can see actually they are kind of quite obvious. So we can quickly go ahead and fix those, just by adding in some more edges. And I like to kind of keep this open while I'm fixing these up, So I can go ahead and redo it and then see, okay, which part is an end-on, which part isn't. So we have another one here. Okay, we'll go ahead and run that again. And if it's just selecting some vertices like this, it's just a bit of a bug. There isn't actually any n-gons there. Those are four-sided. So as long as it's not actually selecting any faces, you're fine. There is no more n-gons here. Okay, so that is everything cleaned up. What I then like to do at this stage is just introduce a bit more geometry or edge loops to try and even things out, okay? Because right now things are very, very uneven, and that's you know, not necessarily a bad thing, but we'd rather have it be a little bit more even, so that when we come to bend this into shape, it's going to deform a bit nicer. You might have some points like here where we have some triangles. In order to put some edge loops across there, I'm just going to come to the top view with the multi-cut. I'm going to hold down shift and then just drag straight across right down the middle to add some extra edge loops in there, okay? And I'm not too worried about having as much density in the middle here, because this area is going to be largely a bit more flat anyway. It's more this area here, down here, that's going to have some more curvature to it. And I think for the sake of this being easier for us, I'm actually just going to make this go straight as well. I think there is some difference in the tire reference here with the length of these, but for the sake of the tutorial and for being a bit easier for us, we'll just flatten those off. Okay, we've got a big gap here that doesn't also have much in the way of edges in it, so I'll go ahead and just add probably one down the middle just for the time being. Okay, so that is our completed sort of initial square. What we then need to figure out is actually how to make this tileable, because if I go ahead and duplicate this now into place, which is going to be around about here, you can see we have a good amount of the topology overlapping here, right? So essentially, the way to do this is we need to find a middle point between these two shapes that we've created, and then kind of cut a line across, and then make the seam sort of identical. So when we duplicate it, they'll just seamlessly connect up. So the way I like to do this is I'll create two of these shapes, duplicating the one we just made, and I will position those into place where they should be. One thing that you can turn on is this X-ray mode up here, and that will kind of, since all these are overlapping, it can be a bit hard to tell without this turned on, you know, since the geometry is kind of, you're getting a bit of something called Z fighting where things are overlapping. If you just turn this on, it kind of smooths it over and you can see if things are a bit more evenly placed. Okay, so that looks about right to me, and what we're essentially looking to do now is take the parts from this side and this side that are overlapping with this one and work them into this piece, okay? So the way I like to do this is we'll go ahead and delete these two extra ones that we made, okay? And I'm just going to center the pivot on this. I'm going to duplicate it and take it across -14, okay? Then we're actually going to be editing this part, okay? The first one that we had. We're going to be using this as a guide. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, but don't worry, it's all part of the process. We are going to modify the shape of the edge on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on wireframe on shaded so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to just start snapping the vertices to the extent of the previous one. Now, if you want to, you can turn on wireframe on shaded so you can get a bit of a better idea of what you're doing. But you see, I'm just snapping the vertices of our initial one into place to line up with this new one that we've duplicated across. Okay, like so. Then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and delete these faces here that we've just created, because we are not going to need them, right? You can see that joins up perfectly with the one we made before. or the one that we duplicated across. Same for here. We're going to go ahead and delete those faces. And because this is the back part of the first one we made, you can see we're actually going to have to do something similar down here. So we'll go ahead and also delete some of these faces, okay? If I just hide, or yeah, if I hide that one I just created, and now duplicate this across, okay, and then just angle or vertex snap that, you can see that now fits together perfectly, okay? But we've got a bit more work to do to make sure that it lines up here as well. So if I undo a few steps just to get back to where we were. Okay, now that we've done that bit, what I then like to do is I'll bring this back and do a positive 14. And then we can see which parts we need to fix on this side. So we need this edge to come up to here. And then go straight across. And some of these we won't be able to angle snap entirely, but I want to do at least a few. So these here we'll have to bring down about as close as we can to match up. And we might need to do some topology tweaking here. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and just delete these faces. Like so that that can slot in. So if I go ahead and delete this side now, and then we'll test it again. So if I pull this back to fit in there, you can see we're nearly there, but we've got a few more bits that we need to fix up, just down here. You see? So there's some more we can cut away here to follow this line. So again, just using the multi-cut tool to bring that together. We can probably merge these two here. We'll just slide that down. Okay, then we can delete a few more of these faces. So we're just kind of whittling this down until we get to the point where we have these perfectly lining up. So this is starting to take a bit of a bizarre shape now, but that's because this is what's going to connect together. So with the pivot point snapped to this corner vertex here, I'm going to duplicate that across, and we're going to see what else we need to remove. So probably all of this. Okay, let's try that again. And now we're just having a look at the last few bits that we need to get rid of. And probably a good amount of this here. So that's now connecting up. And now we just have this last bit here to resolve. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one that we duplicated. I'll put this back to the center. And then I'll just bring that across and we'll see what we need to fix up. So you can see now it really is just these faces that we're down to. But I'm not entirely happy with how this topology looks here, so I'm going to go ahead and just clean that up. We'll snap that there. But you can see this is the same on this side, so since we're going to be editing this one, we want to make sure we mirror that across, okay? So now we kind of just need to add one more cut. And we already have that vertex there. And one there and one there. And then we'll just vertex snap this. Here for the time being, I'm just going to delete those edges so we don't have to worry about that extra bit getting in the way. We'll just delete that. Then we'll delete this one, bring this back to the center, and I think now, if hold your breath, this should now connect up. So there you go. That's now connecting up seamlessly. We have an infinitely tileable pattern. So it took a fair bit of time to get there, and it's certainly not easy, but that's how you create the tileable pattern for your tire. And, you know, each tire pattern is going to be different. This one is certainly more complicated. And we have a bit of topology cleanup to do here because we've got some n-gons and some triangles that have been introduced. But you can see now how that just effortlessly connects. Again, if I was to go ahead and edit mesh and then merge that now, fingers crossed, oh, I'd have to combine them first. If I did edit mesh and then merge, that then now is a single piece. Okay, so if I just undo that, I'm going to keep that pivot point snapped to there because that's going to be important when we duplicate this across. So now what we're going to do is, if I re-enable the reference, I'll come back to the top view, you can see the other side is essentially the same, it's just flipped, okay? Because you can see these ones are coming up and angling in here, this part of the tread, and then this one is coming in, angling in down, okay? Rather than up this way. And that's quite easy for us to duplicate across to the other side. But before we do that, we want to clean this up as much as possible because that will be sort of one of the final things that we do. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the reference for the time being. I'm going to turn the grid back on so I can see the middle. There's this set of faces here, and we don't want that, okay? We want this to perfectly match up. And I'm going to go ahead and do a reverse scale just to make sure it's straight, and hold down X and then snap that to the center of the grid. Okay, we'll come back to perspective. And now we've got a bit of topology cleanup to do from this kind of bizarre surgery that we just did on our model. So we'll just connect those edges up. I think there was one more, if I'm not mistaken. There's this triangle up here, and this is slightly misshapen, so I'm just going to tweak that. The important thing is we don't want to be editing the outside edge now, unless we're also editing the outside edge here. We could potentially just run an edge along there, and then that solves that problem. And we needed another edge down here anyway. We're getting a bit of extra density here, but I'm not too worried. Okay, so let's go ahead and duplicate that across, and -1 in X. So that's not quite matching up to the pattern on the other side. I think for the scope of this video, we're not going to get into creating some sort of extra crazy super duper pattern, otherwise this video is going to go on forever. If you want to make it so that this side matches up, you would have to go ahead and do a -1 in Z as well, and then get this to line up. You can now see we have a gap here. So there's a fair bit of work you're going to have to do to get this pattern to adjust and still be tileable without gaps like this. For this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and leave it like this. Every single tie is different. This perfectly matches up. I'm happy to leave it like that for this. So we'll go ahead, and before we do that, it's actually a good idea to preemptively put some bevels in, because once this is all duplicated out, it's going to be a lot more challenging to do that. Once we have this in a sequence and there's a lot of different pieces. So you kind of want to do it once so you don't have to do it, multiple times later. Okay, so what I like to do is just add in some holding edges along the parts that I know that need to be have a bit more harder edge. You can see here in the reference below us, these have quite harsh edges, even though it's rubber. There's some roundness to it, but it's not too extreme. And with the way it currently is, it probably wouldn't work too well. So don't worry about this not lining up now, because these are pretty much equal on both sides. If you are worried about it, just give it a reverse scale as well. And that will fix any kind of oddities. So I'm just going to be adding a few to cap off the ends of some of these. This one here as well. Okay. Oh, I couldn't tell if that was going across because it's orange. That has then now added an extra edge here where we want this to have a bit of curvature to it. So we'll just have to tweak that slightly to even out the topology here, but that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. And it's all interior, so it's not really going to cause us too many problems. Another one here. And again, same thing. We'll just tweak these edges a little. Okay, so one thing to also make sure before we do anything else is you can see here there is quite a deep inset, extrude. You want to make sure that you do have some straight edges going across there, okay, like we have here. Right? So that should suffice. I don't think we need to add any more to these little ones. In fact, actually, there is one we missed here. But I don't think we need to add too many more to these little ones because they're going to be quite small anyway, and I don't think it'll be too noticeable. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and duplicate this across. Combine, edit mesh, and then merge. So now we have our one big tire piece. We actually now have a really fun task. We're going to look at our reference, and I'm going to roughly count how many parts, right, how many insets we have here, and then that will tell us how many parts we need to duplicate of our tile. So I'll go ahead and time-lapse that, or in fact, no, I'll pause it while I figure out how many are on mine, and you can count yours as well. Okay, so I've just gone ahead and counted exactly how many bits of the tread that we need. For my reference, it ends up being 88, and we know that for our tread part here, we have 2 of the pieces. So we divide 88 by 2, we get 44, which means we need 44 of these. So we're going to go ahead and angle snap, or we're going to go ahead and vertex snap to here, the pivot point, before we start duplicating this out. And at this stage, guys, it is very, very important that you have this separate color in for the tread, because essentially we're going to use that material as a way to select everything before we extrude it. Okay, so before we do anything, make sure you have that in there before you duplicate this out. Once you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and press Ctrl D, okay, and I'm going to drag that until it snaps just to the edge, which for us happens to be -14, like we did before. In order to get this to do that over and over again without us having to do it ourselves, if you just then press Shift D, it's then going to duplicate the previous action and double it. So 14 times 2 goes to 28. And we know that we need exactly 44 of these. So perhaps what you could do is, if it has something like this, maybe call it part 01. And if I duplicate this now, it's going to go out to 02. So we know that we need exactly 44 of these. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly duplicate these out. Okay, so that is all of the parts that we need, all 44. I'm going to go ahead, select all of those, combine, edit mesh, and then merge. Now we have one massive piece. I'm going to do a free on the keyboard to smooth preview. It's going to say, you know, potentially this has a large number of polys. Just click yes, don't ask again. Okay, and you can see that's all combined, no issues with all our vertices connected. So what we then need to do is, I'm going to center this and just bring this back to the middle of the grid. Okay, and we'll go ahead and turn off our reference and then just freeze the transforms. Now, if we've done this all correctly, this edge here will connect up with this edge, and we can now curve this round to start creating the shape of our tire. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to deform, go to nonlinear, and then bend. Okay, that's going to give you a bend handle, and it will show up probably something like this. So I'm going to rotate it. I'll hold down J in order to get that to snap to 15-degree increments, and that's then gone flat like this. To adjust the curvature, you can see here in the channel box editor, if I adjust this, it's going to adjust in the wrong direction, right? That's not going to work too well as a tire. It means we're also going to have to rotate it. It means we're also going to have to rotate it 90 degrees, whether it's minus or positive, doesn't matter, in Z. Now if I start to rotate this, you can see it comes around like so. So obviously we need this to rotate. Just 90 would only be that way, but we want this to be 180 to come all the way around and connect up. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have gone all the way for some reason. It's probably a quirk of the bend handle. So we'll go ahead and just have to do some little micro adjustments of this. So maybe 180.5, 0.8, that's getting close, 0.9, very, very close, maybe 0.92, 0.93, no, that's slightly too much, 0.925. So this will probably vary for yours, but it's going to be around 180, and then you'll just have to tweak it after the fact. Okay, for me it ended up being 180.917 to get that to perfectly come all the way around. We can then go ahead and I'll delete the history. And that will remove our bend handle. And I'm then going to go to edit mesh and then merge again. And that will then now connect those vertices up, assuming we've done the bend correctly. If it hasn't, we're going to have to merge them ourselves, which we don't really want to do because there's a lot. But you can see there, that's all nicely connected. Okay, and then that is the shape of our tire. So there is another step that we need to do before we take this any further. And that is that, you know, obviously great, we've created this pattern, but we need the sides to come in a little bit. So there's a couple different ways we can do that. But one of the best ways, I think, to do it is a mixture of using the lattice deformer and also creating a shape similar to the final tire shape out of a cylinder, and then we'll use that to do any final adjustments to match the shape properly. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and create a cylinder, just rotate it into place, and then scale it up so it just matches the diameter of our tire shape, and then just bring it into the roughly the same size, and then add quite a few divisions to this, maybe something similar to what we have on our tire. Okay, so this is probably going to end up having to be quite high. Maybe something like 200. And this will vary on your tire. But for me, in fact, maybe even something like... The higher the better, basically. I'm going to go with something like 400. And this will just be a shape for us to conform the tire to. But that will make sense in a moment. We know that the sides of our tire have a bit of a curvature to them. So we're going to go ahead and add that in as well. And we'll just do a bevel. And then you want to make this roughly the same size as it is in your reference. For me, it's not too big. Maybe something kind of like this. And then for the segments, I'm going to go ahead and add something like 8. Okay, so that is the kind of guide tire shape for us. That's generally, or kind of roughly what we want it to look like. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to lattice this, okay? And the reason being is we're going to be using this to snap our shape too. If I make this a live surface and then scale this in, I'll show you now. And if I just scale this ever so slightly, we don't want to do it massively, we just want to do like a little tiny bit. It's basically like a shrink wrap. It's then going to conform to the shape of our tire, okay? But it doesn't always work 100%, so we might need to lattice it. And just for the sake of showing you guys how to do that, it seems to have worked for me, but occasionally you might have to go to deform and then lattice, reduce the number of divisions in T, add a few more divisions in S. Maybe I'll just start with something like 8. Then I'll select these points on either side, and then just scale in slightly to kind of match the shape a little bit better. And then we'll go ahead and do it like that. But for me, it just seems to be working, so I'm going to go ahead and make this cylinder shape we've made a live surface, select all the vertices of our tire shape, and then I'm literally just going to hold down left click on this and do the tiniest little bit of a movement, okay? Not much, just boop. Oh, that was a bit too much. Just like that, okay? And then that's gone ahead and snapped. You can see, for me, it's actually not worked this time. We're getting some overlapping geometry. So I am actually going to have to go ahead and do the lattice fix, like I showed you earlier. So I'm just going to select this side. We can actually turn on symmetry as well if I come up to here and go to Object in X, just to make sure that's roughly the same. We'll just pull that in a little bit. And then maybe pull some of this out to match a bit better. Okay, just so that's sitting ever so slightly above the surface, but not too much. Okay, now if I go ahead and do it, it should work, in theory, fingers crossed. And again, just a tiny little bit of the scale. Okay, and there we go. So that has now conformed the shape of our tire to the mesh, and we're getting that curve in there, and that's nice and even as well. We can then go ahead and delete. If we turn off live surface, obviously you won't be able to select it. We can delete the tire shape that we made as a guide. And then we can get to the fun part, which is actually extruding all of these shapes in that we've made. And this is why it's important you have this material, because we're going to use that to select all of these pieces. So I'm going to open up the Hypershade editor. And the material I made is just another one of the Lamberts. It's this here, Lambert 2. I'm going to hold down right click on it and go to Select Objects with Material. Minimize the Hypershade editor and then press Ctrl 1. And you can see now that we have just the parts with the pattern and nothing else. What we're going to do is select this, go to Face Select mode, select all of these faces, okay, and then come back. And now what we'll have selected is just the faces, right? We'll then go to Extrude, and this may take a little bit to load because there's a lot of geometry here. And then we're going to do local translate Z, I think, because that might work a bit better than the thickness in this case. And to begin with, we'll just do -0.5. And we'll see what that looks like. So you can see that's starting to extrude in, but not quite enough. So we'll do something like -1. And then just take a look at your reference to see if that's going in far enough. I think for me, I might make it slightly further, maybe -1.5. Okay. And if I just go back to the regular material, you can now see that we have all of our extrudes. Okay, and we created this all just from a plane. And then that is the general shape of the tie. If I go ahead and do a smooth preview, just by pressing 3 on the keyboard, you can see now that we have all of the extrusions and the depth that we needed. So there's a few more bevels that we need to add to this. And a way to actually do this without having to do a lot manually is if I just undo the extrude that we did. Okay. And then we go ahead and redo that. And first of all, before going all the way down, if we just do something like -0.5. Okay, maybe a little bit too much. -0.1. Maybe -0.2. Essentially what I'm trying to do here is create the bevels for us by doing a stepped extrude. So maybe we'll do -0.15. Okay, if we'll do that again, then we'll do another -1 to get most of the depth that we need. Maybe for me I'll do -1.3. Okay, then we'll do one more. And then this will be the bottom bevel that we'll also do with an extrude. So I'm just pressing G on the keyboard to repeat the previous action. Then we'll do -0.1 again. Yep, something like that. Now that we've done that, you can see that we have those bevels on the inside. If I go ahead and do the smooth preview with 3 on the keyboard again, you can now see that all those shapes are actually holding their edges and they've got a nice kind of hard edge to them. So that is how you create a tire tread pattern in not too long of a time. It is quite complicated, and you know, this is definitely not an easy tread pattern to make. But yeah, from here we could go on and we could select this entire interior edge. We could then extrude that as well, and then just scale that in to create the tire wall. And then do whatever else you want to do with that. And then that's the simple part, really. That's your tire created. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. This will conclude the actual making of the tire or the truck modeling. From this point onwards, we're going to get into actually doing some texturing and then some rendering and lighting as well. But you can see that fits in there pretty nice. We had to scale it down a little bit, obviously, and to match your reference. But yeah, that's how you create perhaps the hardest part of this model, the tire tread pattern, depending on which tire you end up going with. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.